Hello and welcome to The Big Picture. I'm Tina Jha. The Lok Sabha on Friday cleared the Mines and Minerals Development and Regulation Amendment Bill 2021. Passed by voice vote, the bill is aimed at bringing more transparency in the auction process and also to boost employment in the sector. Union Mines Minister Prahlad Joshi claimed that 55 lakh direct and indirect employment would be generated due to the reforms. The Mines and Minerals Development and Regulation Amendment Bill 2021 amends the Mines and Minerals Development and Regulation Act of 1957, which regulates the mining sector in India. So on this edition of The Big Picture, we will analyze what the Mines and Minerals Development and Regulation Amendment Bill 2021 entails and how will these reforms enhance the mining sector's contribution to the country's GDP. To discuss these aspects and much more, I'm joined on the show today by two distinguished panelists. I'm pleased to welcome on this edition of The Big Picture, Mr. Chakshu Roy, Head of Outreach, PRS, and Mr. Ganpati Subramaniam, he's a senior journalist. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining me on the show today. Mr. Roy, let me begin the program with you. Let's first try and understand the key changes that the Mines and Minerals Development and Regulation Amendment Bill 2021 will bring about.
Tina, as you said in your opening remarks that the mines and mineral sector is governed by the Act of 1957. Now, what this Act provides is a number of different things. It provides as to how mining leases in the country will be given. It also used to provide the purpose for why these leases would be given. Some bit of auction, also about how do you ensure the well-being of people for whom who live in areas where mines have been auctioned. Now, over the last 10 years, the Mines and Minerals Act has been amended on a few different occasions, and this is the latest in the series of amendments. Before I go into the details of what the amendments entail, let me just briefly talk about one or two things. So currently, under the law, we broadly have two kinds of mines. We have mines which are called captive mines, and we have mines which are called open mines. Now, captive mines are the ones which are currently utilized for a specific purpose. So, for example, let us say if there is a steel plant and then there's an iron ore mine, then only that steel plant will be using that iron ore mine. So that's a captive mine, so to say. Or if there is a cement plant, then there's a limestone mine. So the first thing that the bill is doing is that it is removing this distinction between captive and non-captive mines.
Okay.
So now what will happen is that when mines get auctioned, they will not be attached to a specific purpose of a specific industry or a specific sector. So that's the first thing. The second thing that is happening is that captive mines earlier could only, the ore that used to come out of that captive mine could only go to that captive industry. So if iron ore was coming out, only that iron and steel plant could use that particular ore. Now, what this bill is providing is that sometimes it happens that the captive mine is producing more iron ore that can be used in the industry. So there's a little bit of a surplus. Now the mine couldn't sell that surplus out in the open market because the lease conditions were that whatever ore comes out has to go into that particular plant. What the bill currently is doing is it is allowing captive mines, the leaseholders of captive mines, to sell up to 50% of their ore into the open market, with one caveat. Whatever ore that they sell in the open market, they'll have to pay some amount of money to the government for selling that ore. So that's one thing. The second big thing that's happening in this bill is every mine, when it is allocated, the leaseholder has to get certain statutory permissions for running that mine. They could be permissions around environment and clearances and so on and so forth. So every time when the mine was auctioned, the new mine owner had to, or the new mine lessor had to take permissions fresh they had to take those statutory permissions all over again. So one of the things that this bill is doing is that now if somebody is able to get a mine through an auction, the previous regulations, the previous statutory clearances that were associated with the mine will now get transferred to the new person who's getting that mine. So those are the two broad things that the bill is doing, amongst many other things. But let me stop there.
Okay. Mr. Subramaniam, let me get you in now into the debate. So, apart from the distinction that's been made that Mr. Roy spoke about, what we also heard the Union Coal and Mines Minister speak in Lok Sabha yesterday during the discussion of the bill was that India has the same mineral potential if we compare it to South Africa and Australia. We produce around 95 minerals. But despite having this huge mineral potential, our mining sector till date remains underexplored. So help us understand first why till date we've not been able to harness the potential of the mining sector and what difference going forward these reforms are going to make.
If I have to explain in very short 2 words, legacy issues. That is the major problem with our entire mining sector over a period of time, as Mr. Chaksurai explained, captive mines. So if you have to get a mine, then you have to have a steel plant. Only that steel plant can't use that iron ore. If the plant closes down, then what will happen? So many bottlenecks. Now to clear all those bottlenecks and all those complex issues, the government is trying step by step, a number of issues, which ultimately the aim is to get more investment into the mining sector, more foreign investment into the mining sector, more technology into the mining sector, and technology that is safe and effective in mining. Ultimately, all this will lead to profitable mining and creation of huge amount of employment. As you correctly pointed out, the potential is enormous, but we have been completely tied up because of these complexities. We all know about the coal scam that happened during the previous Hug government, and there was such a huge controversy, court cases, etc. Why? All that happened because of total lack of transparency. There was no auction and there was no commercial mining. It was captive mining. Somebody says, I am going to run a steel plant, so I need iron ore mine. Somebody says, I am going to produce so and so things, so I need so and so mineral. So all these things, when they are tied up with each other, if the one thing goes wrong, then everything stops working. So that is why now the government is simplifying everything. A mine is given to you, you do commercial mining. You do the mining and you sell it to anybody like X or Y. It should be absolutely on commercial terms, not like captively, I'm using it for my factory. If I'm not able to use it, then it is getting wasted, then the production is not happening. All those complexities, all those legacy issues will go away once the government is able to achieve step by step complete commercial mining. So it is a very clean slate for the industries also. Whether I am a steel plant or X or Y is a steel plant, everybody can go and commercially buy iron ore. We need not worry, mere paas iron ore ka mine hai, so I am doing my own mining. Somebody else does not have his mine. He is not able to do. All those things will go away. It will be complete parity. So therefore, it's a good opportunity to completely open up commercial mining, safe mining, bring in foreign investment, new technology, and produce much more. And because of all this, create economic activity and employment.
Okay. Mr. Roy, coming back to you. So we spoke about how these reforms as part of this bill talk about removing the distinction between captive and non-captive mines. At the same time, it mentions introduction of an index-based mechanism. Now, for the benefit of our viewers, if you could tell us more about how this mechanism is expected to function, how will it be beneficial towards boosting exploration?
Okay, so there are 2 or 3 different processes, very broadly speaking, that are undertaken before somebody actually goes ahead and digs up the earth to obtain minerals. Now, one part of the process is that if there's a large area in which there is mineral potential, then in the Act, companies had a non-exclusive license to do a reconnaissance of that area to find out as to whether there was mineral potential. So let's say if there is, 10,000 square kilometers of an area in which there is mining potential, so companies would, drill holes in different parts of that area to figure out as to what is the kind of mineral content and what is there and what is not there. They could also do aerial surveys, use seismic machines, use photography to find out and just cover that entire area and figure out as to where there was mineral potential and then bid, for that area. Now, that non-exclusive part of prospecting is something that is being removed under this particular bill. There are two more things that are being done with respect to mining leases. Under the 2015 Act, there was a comprehensive mechanism that was laid down for auction purposes. Now, one of the things that the bill is doing is, let us take, for example, if there is a mine for which the lease is expired and an auction is supposed to take place, the state government is supposed to do an auction. But for some reason, for a predetermined amount of time, the auction has not been taken place. Now, in this case, the central government can step in and actually do the auction process. So that's the idea is that mines should not stay idle, and there should be some kind of when the mine is auctioned, then obviously there's an auction amount that comes, and there's some kind of a royalty also comes when the minerals are inside. So that's one part of it. There are also provisions in the bill which allow the government to extend, in some cases, mining leases to government companies for a period of 10 years or till the time that lease is auctioned. The idea, again, is to make sure that the utilization of the mines is more efficient. Then there is, in every area, there is a mining development fund. And the purpose of this fund is that money should be spent for the benefit in that area. Mm-hmm. And one of the provisions that is there in the bill says now the central government can also direct as to how the money in these funds which are there on the ground, how will that money be spent?
Okay. Mr. Subramaniam, another thing that the amendment proposes is to allow captive miners of both coal as well as minerals to sell up to 50% of their production after meeting the requirements of the end-use plan and on paying additional royalty to the state government. So, of course, this is a move that is going to increase flexibility. But if we talk about from the context of the miners, how is it going to be beneficial for them?
This cap is also flexible. If necessary, the government can go above the cap also. It's mentioned there in the bill. And while discussions were taking place in Lok Sabha, one could very clearly see there were 2-3 types of interest. One, state governments, various regional parties which rule states, etc. They have their own concerns, like they want a royalty. On the other hand, they also want development because of mining, many industries coming to their area, creation of employment. Then there are also, because of the legacy issues, there are vested interests, like companies which already have a mining lease don't want that to go away from them. Even in that case, say now government has come out with another provision that even if you have a captive mine, you are not doing fully commercial mining. In that case also, apart from your own use, whatever surplus you have, you can sell. That will generate additional revenue for the state concerned and the central government concerned, and also some additional business for the company concerned. It's good for everybody. So therefore, the point that you raise is very, very important. Why all this is happening is because of the background that we have seen over a period of time. Many corporate houses have their own captive mines. Then there are many government companies which are into mining and which are into metals business based on these mines, etc. Now we have to remember that the government is going to do big time disinvestment. When disinvestment happens, the PSU, whether it is a PSU dealing in metals, whether it is a PSU dealing in mines, whether it is a PSU dealing in some other business, all of them are going to be divested one after one. Government is going to sell their shares and give them more freedom so that they can grow in a corporate culture. So in that context, this is very important. Even if you don't have a completely commercial mining license, if it is captive, you can still go for commercial mining within the scope of that. So therefore, the government is ready to go every single mile necessary to make mining more profitable, because India has the potential to generate a lot of employment, lot of exports and lot of foreign exchange earning through mining. So therefore, the government is taking this step also. However, state governments have their own interests. That is why they are also very keen to ensure that they get a bulk of their royalty share and also other benefits out of the mining activity. So if these two activities are balanced from the government side and the corporate sector is allowed to do mining on a profitable scale, then it will be a win-win for everybody.
So apart from these objectives, which of course the government has highlighted, and that's perhaps these reforms are being brought about, but what kind of impact will it have on other industries that are related to the mining sector, which are sort of dependent upon raw material that is provided by mining sector, like cement, aluminium, steel, and all that?
Exactly, very important question. Right now, even though we have so much potential, we also import a lot of raw materials. So that's why after the COVID, what we are seeing is that the Atma Nirbhar Bharat is trying to ensure that we don't depend on imports on any sector, and then we develop our own capacity. In that case, mines is also one important sector. Right now, many important industries, including steel, copper, etc., they import a lot of ore or import a lot of other raw materials and intermediaries so that they can do value addition and then sell in the domestic market or export. Some of them do both as well. Now, what will happen is, because of this production boom in mining production, there will be a lot of metal industries and there will be a lot of ancillary industries which will come up. The benefit, you can imagine, will go up step by step all the way, even up to the automobile sector, even up to the paint sector. So many industries will benefit out of this. Say real estate will benefit because there will be a boost to cement and boost to steel, etc. So therefore, this is like the basic foundation. Once we liberalize this foundation and allow growth to happen without any kind of shackles, then over a period of time, now it may not happen in 1 year, it may not happen in 2 years, but then over a period of time, the amount of foreign investment coming into India and the amount of production happening in India will make India a major hub of supply to the whole world.
Yes, absolutely. So it's all interconnected. Reforms in the mining sector may also propel growth in the other sectors that are dependent on this sector. Let's now come to the concerns, Mr. Roy. The amendment proposes to fix additional royalty payments to the states for the extension of mining leases for the central public sector enterprises. Now, it's being said that the state governments may object to the fixing of an additional royalty that is to be paid by the CPSEs for such extension, as this may also lead to lower revenues as compared to a transparent auction process. So how valid is this concern?
So, Tina, I think you're right. State governments have a few concerns, and these concerns can be broadly, grouped under the umbrella as to where there is the power of the central government end and where does the power of the state government begin. Now, for example, one of the provisions in the bill is that if auction for a mine cannot be completed in a particular amount of time, then the central government might step in and auction that mine off. So state governments might obviously be thinking as to, should that be the case? Auction of mines is supposed to be an area which is delimited for the powers of the state government. So state governments' revenues, royalties are very linked to in some states they're very linked to the outcome of mining. So that's one part of it. The second part of it is, in my previous remarks, I was mentioning there's a fund on the ground called the District Mineral Fund. And money goes into this fund for the benefit of the area in which mining is taking place. Now, another question that state governments might be wondering is, as to fund which is being administered on the ground, should the central government be directing as to how money in that fund should be spent? So these are two issues, that are well worth discussing when it comes to this bill. One final thing also, which is useful to think about, not only in this particular bill, but in any technical area, is as to what should be the role of an independent regulator. Because, when you were mentioning that government companies might get licenses, now, whenever the government has a role to play in a sector, and the government has a role and the private sector has a role, very often we have seen that, let's say, whether it is in telecom, whether it is in insurance, whether it is in electricity, an independent regulator is brought in. And the purpose of this independent regulator is to make sure that no particular side is favored. It makes sure that utilization of resources for the benefit of the country is maximized. It ensures that there is adequate compensation. So one of the things that we should be thinking about in terms of this bill is, where is that mining regulator that we can, or some version of a mining regulator, so that the central government is not always burdened with taking operational decisions. We have to auction a mine because a mine has not been auctioned, or money has to be spent. So that's another area that we need to think about when it comes to this bill.
Okay, Mr. Subramaniam, so although transparency looks like the central factor to all these reforms that are being spoken about through this bill, but the states may contend that their powers, the discretionary powers, are being infringed upon. So in that scenario, could the amendments face legal challenges, particularly by states that are not ruled currently by the BJP and its allies?
Definitely. One thing I would like to point out is that state governments have always been raising issues related to mining, etc.
Yes.
But then, more important than that is environmental concerns. See, the impact of mining should not spoil the environment of that region. That particular issue should be focused by both the state government as well as the central government in each and every area. As you correctly pointed out, many state governments are run by the party which is not in power in the central government. So therefore, there are different views, etc. There's a different party ruling state government. There's a different party in power at the center. So differences definitely can happen. So as Mr. Chaksurai pointed out, if there is a regulatory body, many of those issues can be resolved. Of course, courts have also been taking cognizance of these issues. But in the best interest of the mining industry, every state should try to work in cooperation with the central government and make sure that mining is environment friendly, using new technology, using more and more investment, so that it becomes safe for the people who are involved in mining, and also it becomes a big employment generator at the local level, because we have employment generation happening in the cities. But what about the rural areas where the mines are located? So therefore, employment generation is a big concern, which should satisfy the needs of the state government as well as the central government. So towards this common objective, they should sink their differences and work together, and also make sure that environmental degradation does not happen. If these things are ensured, I think state governments will be happy over a period of time, even if they continue to have differences with the central government.
Okay, let me take one final round of questions now. Mr. Roy, back to you. So the objective, of course, is to enhance the contribution of the mining sector to the country's GDP. At present, it is around 1.75%. We need to take it up to at least 2.5%. So even though these reforms promise a lot of things, will they help us achieve this target of 2.5%, or there are still some gaps that need to be filled?
Tina, I think one of the things that you mentioned is about transparency in one of your previous remarks. The purpose of the bill and for the Mining Act is to ensure maximization of returns of the country's natural resources. So we have a mineral resource. How does the law ensure that the country as a whole benefits the maximum out of it? Now, this is a law which has a lot of moving parts onto the ground. The state government is involved, the central government is involved, and we'll have to let the law function on the ground for a little while to see as to what are the kind of problems that come up, what are the kind of issues that come up. And can those issues be resolved legislatively or judicially or administratively? So we'll have to wait and watch as to how the rollout of this bill happens onto the ground.
Okay, one final question from you, Mr. Subramaniam. So we've spoken about the huge potential that we have in mineral resources, but still we are importing around 2.5 lakh crore rupees worth minerals. So do these reforms promise that from being an importer currently, we can become an exporter in the coming times?
Minerals are by their very nature bulky cargo, because when you need to export, the value may be one thing, but the volume is huge. So for that, we need a lot of infrastructure in terms of railway rakes, port capacities, and our shipping facilities. So this makes sure that there is also employment. One hand, we need a lot of capacity to really make a dent in the world market and export big time. But at the same time, we will end up generating a lot of employment. So the effort is worth the while. Like we should remember that China keeps importing high-grade iron ore from India, and many a time we find that finished steel from China enters India. So that's the kind of effort countries make to bring value addition to the table, so that employment is generation. So Tina ji, as you said, if we increase the exports exponentially, we are creating additional jobs. And then the lesson that COVID has taught us is that shipping industry and other transport industries, the passenger side of it might be affected, but the cargo side of it will continue to function even if there is a global pandemic or any such situation. So therefore, the mines which are located in the hinterland, it is possible that they will work without any trouble even during such periods. So therefore, we should encourage them more and more and learn from the lessons of COVID, Tina ji.
Absolutely. So with that, I'll have to call it a wrap on this edition of The Big Picture. Thank you to both my guests once again for joining me on the program and sharing your perspective on the subject with us. Pleasure having you on the program with us. So that's it from us on this edition of The Big Picture. Just in case you missed the television broadcast, let me remind you, you can also watch it on YouTube and Twitter, and you can send in your feedback and suggestions to us as well. Thank you for your time.